The Caribbean country of Haiti has been plagued by chaos and bloodshed since its founding, with episodes of major violence flaring up from time to time. While the latest chaos that has been simmering over the past year erupted in recent weeks, plunging Haiti further into an increasingly serious humanitarian, political, and security crisis. What's behind this? It's important to know what's behind it in order to find out what the solutions might be. Join me now to discuss this, Dr. A.J. Nolte, an associate professor at Regent University. Much of Dr. Nolte's PhD dissertation research looked into faith and politics in relation to state formation. Dr. Nolte, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you with us.
Great to be back, Tony. Thanks so much.
So before we get into what's currently happening, let's step back here because, Haiti has, it just has a record of turbulence and difficulties. Give us a little bit of historical background on Haiti.
So Haiti becomes independent of France in 1804. Very famously, there's a slave revolution. It was one of those Caribbean slave colonies where slavery was particularly brutal and pervasive institution. And so there was a revolution, and it's the chaos of revolutionary France. Haiti becomes independent in that time period, and really has kind of since then there have been periods of stability, but there's been, as is often the case in Central and South America, there's been a lot of instability, chaos, class conflict. To a certain extent, some of the conflict has been racial in the past between different, variations. Race and class are sometimes closely linked in Haiti, and so what you've seen is sort of brief periods of stability, longer periods of instability, and in recent years, probably within the past, since the 1980s, state failure. And state failure in particular that followed on from the Duvalier dictatorships, father and son, who were dictators. And I'll come back to that in a second when we start looking at how we got there. But you had a pattern of dictatorship followed by chaos and instability, and then a spiral that has led to what I think would be, and some people say this is controversial, but I think it's fair to say we are now in state failure in Haiti.
Let's go back to Papa Doc and Baby Doc in particular, because the United States has a history in Haiti.
Yeah.
I mean, our hands are not clean when it comes to Haiti. Let's talk about that.
So the United States has a long history of intervening in Caribbean countries, sometimes to provide quote unquote stability and security, sometimes to kind of look out for its own interests in terms of extraction. And the U.S., particularly during the Cold War, had a history of supporting dictatorships that were often quite brutal in Caribbean countries. And so many people looking at Haiti will say, well, the U.S. is really, in whole or in part, responsible for a lot of the problems in Haiti. And I think the problems in Haiti, there's so many different causal factors that are causing the situation in Haiti. So the U.S. intervention is probably one of them. But I will say this, I think it has been somewhat, in a lot of the popular media, it has been somewhat exaggerated. Let me give you a little bit of context as to why I say that. When in comparative politics, which is my subdiscipline of what we study, we like to look at countries that have a lot of things the same so we can try to isolate what's different. And Haiti, of course, Tony, as you know, shares the island of Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic. Now, what's interesting about this comparison is that in 1960, these two countries had basically the same per capita GDP. Now, Dominican Republic's GDP is about 5 times that of Haiti, according to the World Bank. And what's interesting is, even in that time, both of those countries had dictatorships. Both those countries had U.S. interventions. Both those countries were sort of U.S. allies against the Soviet Union, and the U.S. was supporting them. And yet, there's a very different outcome. And so what we try to do in a situation like that is say, okay, look at these two countries. Is there a variable that we can isolate that is different? And I will say this, just to be honest with you and your listeners, with Haiti and the Dominican Republic, that's actually a very challenging thing to do.
Is there, when you look back at the history, as you said, it became a country as result of the slave revolt, seeking their freedom. Poverty has long been a problem there. But as you look at the, in your expertise of the role of faith in nation formation, is there any faith foundation in Haiti? I mean, there's a lot of the cultic activity there.
Yeah.
Is that a contributing factor to the instability that we see in the chaos?
So I want to say probably yes. I want to give a slight caveat to that. And the caveat is it's really hard to get good numbers on things like how many people are voodoo practitioners in Haiti, because different studies and different things that you go will claim different numbers. And there's a reason for that. And that is because in Haiti, as you see in other parts of the Caribbean to some extent, Christianity and these practices that are largely drawn out of West African and indigenous Caribbean spirituality are kind of mixed in with Christianity. So it's all sort of mixed together in what we call syncretism.
Right.
But there are a couple of things that I look at when I look at religion. So generally speaking, religion will actually be a positive for development for societies. It increases social trust, so trust between members of the same society, and it increases social capital, because religion and religious organizations, they tend to do a lot of stuff. They combat poverty. They help bring people together. Christianity in particular tends to be really good for things like literacy. Because Christians are teaching people obviously to read the Bible. It's very important. However, what you can see sometimes with different types of paganism and some of those elements that were syncretized with Roman Catholicism in Haiti have this, is that actually the relationship with the gods is more like a more equivalent of a mafia relationship, where it's patron client. It's not like a personal relationship based on mutual love and even in fact having certain rights as bearers of the image of God. It's very much about extracting power and having sort of almost being in a patron client relationship where the pagan gods operate as sort of mob bosses. Why might this be problematic? Well, partially because it sets up an institutional framework where it normalizes that as sort of to say, this is the way society is organized. Because as people believe about transcendent realities, that's going to impact the way they think, the world works. And so unfortunately, I think that could be leading to some of the lack of social trust for those outside of the immediate circle that we see in Haiti. And low social trust is definitely something that is inhibiting economic growth and economic development.
Also, with the absence of that, I mean, it factors into the rule of law. I mean,
yes,
because, the one thing about especially Christianity, which is the area that I've focused on, the foundation of all forms of government, whether it's family government, whether it's church government, or it's civil government, is self-government. And
yes,
and you really, that seems to have been all but lost in Haiti.
Yes. Well, and you're right in saying that the rule of law is directly related to a lot of these religious ideas, and particularly, I would say, Christian ideas play a very important role there. So, for example, take the issue of corruption. We as Americans tend to think of corruption as unnatural. But actually, if we look at the Bible, corruption is a natural. It's a consequence of the fall. It comes in from sin, and it's part of human nature. And we actually have to work really, really hard to build a society where that's not just seen as the way things are done. But that's kind of the role of the church in keeping Absolutely.
lawlessness in check. I mean, the New Testament
Yes.
even talks about that.
Yes, and that's borne out by social scientific data. Strong churches and strong high levels of religiosity, particularly Christianity, tend to correlate with low levels of corruption. Now, if you look at just pure demographics, you look at Haiti and say it's majority Christian, but a lot of that Christianity, there are these other syncretic elements that are there. And so that might be impeding normally we would see Christianity help with rule of law, and we're not seeing that.
But that is not, as you pointed out, not isolated to Haiti. We see a lot of that in Central and South America. So I want to go back to your comparative analysis with Dominican Republic. Can you identify any variables that are different that might contribute to the reason the Dominican Republic is prospering?
Probably the best variable is the Dominican Republic, even when it was under dictatorship, there was the dictatorship, and this is not to say that the dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo wasn't nasty and terrible, and we would obviously prefer to be under democracy, but Trujillo did try to modernize the country and try to kind of build things toward free markets. From what I can tell, and I'm not an expert on the history of Haiti as much as I am in some other areas, but from what I can tell, basically the father and son Duvalier just stole everything that wasn't nailed down.
Right.
And there was no attempt at any kind of development or anything for the country. And so what happened when they fell was anarchy. It's very similar in trajectory to Somalia, where you had a very brutal, corrupt dictatorship. It falls, and then immediately you have a humanitarian crisis.
So are we looking at the same situation in Haiti as we see in Somalia, where the strongest warlord, gang leader comes forth and provides some kind of tyrannical government, in terms of not really government, but just kind of keeping everybody in check because they have the strongest power?
Unfortunately, that's one of the possible outcomes. The United States has intervened in the past and it hasn't been able to sustain it. And that's one of the problems, is that if you're going to have a successful solution in Haiti, you have to have locals on the ground who have enough capacity to basically, beat the gangs in a fight if they need to, right? So the military and the police have what we call in political science terms the monopoly of force, and also have enough trust from the people that they can govern the country effectively. That's a very long-term project, and that's not a project that the United States, the U.S. intervention is, if we're going to do that, as a Band-Aid at best, and the solution is going to have to come from local folks. And I would also say it's going to have to come from a serious, sustained engagement of faithful Christians. The good news from that perspective is that Christians have a history of being involved in countries like that, being the first responders, being at the tip of the spear. And actually, as in a paper that I co-wrote with Ariel Del Turco, who's there at FRC, if you want to force multiplier for international development, faith-based organizations are the key to that. And so it's going to have to be primarily local driven. And then the outside actors that are going to have to be the most involved are faith-based. But before they can come in, of course, you need security.
Yeah. So where does that security come from?
Security, I think, is going to have to come from the U.S. and other actors helping to stand up local, stand up and train local forces. And that's a long-term project.
Yeah.
In other words, you might have temporary security provided by internationals, but you need to transition as quickly as you can to trusted local forces.
Right, because without that, you cannot begin to do the rebuilding that is required, and especially having the faith community come in and build those relationships in the infrastructure that's going to be necessary. Dr. Nolte, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to see you as well.